Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Shell, Chair. We have our committee in full. Councillor Neal, Vice Chair. Councillor McLaren, Councillor Osanek, Councillor Turner. Members of our staff include our Commissioner Hurdle and Director Agnew, and we have our Manager Newman and Mr. of the consulting firm that helped with our monumental official plan update, and City Lawyer Ms. Ray, our Manager of Vendetti, Planner Sands, Planner Diedrichson, and Director Wigginton in the background. So welcome to everyone, and of course our clerk, Mr. Thompson. I won't be reading a very large introduction this evening because we have no public meetings. So I'll call the meeting to order and ask for approval of the agenda. Moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Turner. All those in favor? And that's carried. And confirmation of the minutes of Thursday, February 2nd. Moved by Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Osanek. Questions, errors, omissions? All those in favor? And that's carried. Disclosures of pecuniary interest? None. Delegations, briefings. And our first order of business is the official plan update comprehensive report. And Mr. Newman is going to give us an introduction. Or Ms. Agnew.
Yeah, I'm coming to the mic.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to take a minute. This is obviously a very exciting night for the planning department. This has been 2.5 years of work building to this, to what we have before you this evening, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pieces of correspondence and conversations and thoughtful discussions about the amendments that you have before you this evening. I just wanted to take a moment to recognize my team, and specifically the leadership of Greg Newman as it relates to the work that's been done on the official plan. I think he's truly set a new standard for the way that we are working on our policy documents, and I've been very impressed with his professionalism and his patience and his diligence on this project, and also wanted to thank Rory and the team at Dillon for the support that they've provided to us as well. So without further ado, I will let Greg present to you the official plan, and we're happy to take comments and questions after. Thank you.
Thank you, Paige, and through you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, fellow staff, and members of the public. As Paige mentioned, my name is Greg Newman. I'm the Manager of Policy Planning, and I'm happy to present the final draft of the official plan with a recommendation to the committee. So I'm going to provide a fairly brief presentation. I did want the opportunity, though, just to give you an overview of the revisions that have been made since the November 17th public meeting. So, as you know, the current plan was approved by the Minister in 2010, and we're required under the Planning Act every 5 years to do a comprehensive update. So the purpose of the update is to make sure that our plan is consistent with provincial policy, that it meets local expectations, recognizes local priorities and community needs. So we started this project, as Paige mentioned, about 2 years ago, and we're continuing to move towards a finish line. So the process to date, I won't go through this in detail, but you see there's a bit of a recurring theme here. We have a draft, an open house, a public meeting, a lot of revisions, and then another draft. And we've done this now. We're on the 6th draft, if you will. And I think that really demonstrates the effective public input in this process. We have taken a lot of time to consider the many issues that you see on the slide here. One of the changes to the Planning Act last year was that when we present the notice of decision of council, so when this, assuming this goes to council for a decision on the implementing bylaw, when we post notice of the decision or when the province posts notice of the decision, they have to identify the effect of public input. And so I think the effect of public input is that we are on the 6th draft. And at each iteration, we have very much considered and made changes to recognize the great input that we've received. 2 weeks ago, we posted to the project webpage, and I provided an email to all members of council and members on our mailing list notice of a summary report that was posted with the final draft of the OP as requested by this committee. And so the summary report acknowledges all the very intimate changes to the 5th draft that were made. It's a 48-page summary, which may seem like a lot, I would say about 20 pages of that 48-page summary are things that we could have changed through an administrative amendment, so not sort of necessitating a broader conversation, things like corrections to section references and that sort of thing. We also acknowledged in the summary report the changes that were done to implement the recommendations of the commercial lands review. So again, that sort of made up for about 10 more pages of that 48-page report. And I just wanted to note here that the changes related to the commercial lands review were actually presented in the 5th draft. So they were available to the public back in October when we made that draft available on the project webpage, and were discussed briefly on the 17th of November. So in terms of the revisions, I'm happy to refer members of the committee to the 900-page agenda for tonight. I won't go through it in painstaking detail, but perhaps I'll brush through it, and then if you have questions, we can get into the specifics. So we added definitions specifically as they relate to source water protection. We relocated some of the policies. So source water protection was previously in Section 6, which deals with the environment and energy. We moved it to Section 5, which deals with human health and safety. And Section 5, as it relates to source water protection, is protection of water quality for drinking. So it made more sense to have it in Section 5 than in Section 6. We made a number of revisions to help clarify the intent of policy. We corrected or we added section cross references, so specifically with respect to Section 2.7, which deals with compatibility. So we might have said somewhere that we ought to consider compatibility, but now what we've said is you ought to consider compatibility in accordance with Section 2.7. And what that does is for the reader, they're directed to the section and they're directed to the policy tests in that section, like demonstrating no loss of privacy or shadowing or light and so on. We've removed reference to as-of-right zoning permissions, and I wanted to give this specific reference because it is one of the few very specific policy changes that we made that wasn't more of an administrative change. So what this section does, Section 3612, it speaks to if you're in a business park, like say St. Lawrence Business Park on the East End, and you want to put a hotel in, the floor area of the hotel can't exceed 25% of the total floor area of all the employment uses. And the intent is to make sure that we protect the primary function, which is to provide opportunities for employment and not sort of water it down, so to speak, with commercial type uses. So what we had in the policy before was that we were going to enable as-of-right permissions through zoning, and that was recognized in the policy. And we don't want to do that. In fact, what we want to be able to do is when someone comes in and proposes a hotel in one of our business parks, we want to subject them to a rezoning, and the test is established in this policy of the official plan. So we took out from the OP the as-of-right permissions, or the expectation that we would put the permissions in the zoning, and we're leaving it now to being an actual public process through a rezoning application. So I think we're adding greater public transparency by removing an expected outcome. We've been working through the planning committee, we've been working on changes to the parking associated with accessible parking spaces. And in reviewing the regulations associated with the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, there are some considerations to be made if you were ever going to look at relief from the required supply of accessible parking. So what we did is we wanted the exceptions that are considered in the regulations to be recognized in our official plan so that they're not lost by staff or members of the public that are reviewing an application. We've consulted with the Built Environment Working Group that supports the Municipal Accessibility Advisory Committee. We've consulted them on the language, and everyone is comfortable and supportive of the language that we've presented. And again, that's in the table in detail. Lastly, with respect to the general changes, so in earlier iterations of the plan, we took the Clogs Road area out. It was previously identified as deferred area, which means if we grow beyond our boundary, we'll grow into that next area. We had in earlier iterations changed it to Business Park Industrial, but there are a number of residences existing today in there, so we wanted the policy to recognize that the residences are there and they will continue to be contemplated in whatever happens through the secondary planning process for that area. So we didn't want there to be a perception that someone's losing their right to their residence that exists today. Matters of provincial interest. So Assuming this goes to council and then council supports this then goes to the province for a decision. And so we've been working very closely over the last 3 months with the province to resolve the outstanding sort of 2 or 3 things of concern or interest. One of the things that was concerning to the province was that we had policies that said homes for the aged, group homes, detoxification center, and those types of uses. So it was very specific to the user as opposed to just the general nature of the land use. So what we've done is we've refined that fairly lengthy section in section 3.2. It was community and care facilities. We now capture all those different uses under the definition of a special needs facility, which is ultimately a place where people receive support. So we've refined it in the province. I think we'll be very pleased with where we've ended up there. The Ribbon of Life policies garnered a lot of interest through this project, and we've worked, I think, very collaboratively with the public and with the ministry alike. So I did ask the Ministry of Municipal Affairs if they could get something in writing from the MOECC, so Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, just to make sure that we were on the same page with respect to where these policies were going, and we have that. So MOECC and the Ministry of Municipal Affairs have both supported the policy framework that we're proposing for the Ribbon of Life area, so the area within 30 meters of the water. A big change in terms of, I think, the likelihood of success with the ministry is the removal of the proposed urban boundary expansion in the St. Lawrence Business Park. So I have to admit the planner at the ministry breathed a sigh of relief when she heard we were going to remove that from this plan. So I hope for a smoother review. Amendments to clarify the hierarchy of provincial interests. So this is where we have things like fish habitat and a mineral resource. So someone comes forward, they want to propose extraction of rock in an area where we show a watercourse that's fish bearing. We as planning staff become a little confused because they're competing provincial interests. One says you should give priority to the extraction, the other says you should give priority to the fish. So what we've done is we've clarified and we've worked with the province to ensure the policies are really clear to say, if you need a permit from the federal government to alter fish habitat, you get that first and then you can look at the extraction. So the policies have been clarified there to recognize the hierarchy of interest. The last item on this with respect to the province is the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. The province is adamant that we ask for these aggregate impact assessments whenever we propose an activity that has the potential to compromise the extraction of bedrock. And in Kingston, we sit on a limestone plain, so we sit on a lot of bedrock. And if we have to ask for an aggregate impact assessment with every Planning Act application, we're going to deter a lot of things from happening, just as a starting point. So we've agreed with the ministry to work together on refining the scope of what an aggregate impact assessment will say and when it will be required. So it's kind of a placeholder for doing some more work to better define when we're going to ask for this assessment. A lot of corrections to just general section references, agency names, bullet formatting, grammar, site-specific policies. So we had policies where it refers to 439 King Street, and now, for whatever reason, there were severances, so now the address has changed to 450 King Street, so we're just doing some clarification of actual civic addresses and street names. We've removed policy duplication, discretionary language, and what I'll refer to as vague terms. So we have things like, wherever possible, we'd like you to do this. Well, that doesn't really help us when we're actually looking at an application. And we're going to ask you to stringently do something. Again, what does that mean from just simply doing it? So we've removed some of that flexible language. We've removed undefined acronyms. We've italicized defined terms where they were missed or not italicized before. We had some feedback from Paul McClatch and his team in Environment with respect to some updates to references to things like records of site condition and Stage 1 and Stage 2 environmental site assessments. So we've just made sure that the language is current as it relates to the Environmental Protection Act. And lastly, Bill 73 sort of came into effect in June or July 1st of last year, so we've made some changes to make sure we're consistent with the legislation. There are a number of changes to the schedule. I won't walk you through each one on the map here, but I think the big one, the one that affected the most properties, was certainly the removal of the urban boundary expansion. It was shown on almost every schedule, so where it was up here, the top right of the screen there. So we've removed that from the proposal. We've recognized some properties that have been approved for official plan amendments since we started this project. So for example, 23 Soccer Lane, which is where the Walmart was going to go off of Division. That property received approval for an OP amendment, so we recognize it in Schedule 3D, which recognizes all the properties with site-specific policies. Just north of the 401 in the lands largely owned by the CRCA, it's a clay ridge ANSI, and our policies say that any ANSI should be designated environmental protection area. This ANSI was not designated EPA, so we've actually changed the designation, and I've been in contact with the CRCA, and they're okay with the change. They're the primary landowner. The city of Kingston owns a small chunk of land in there as well. So that's reflected on Schedule 3B. There were some minor corrections to Schedule 5, which is the pathways, just to recognize the waterfront master plan, and some tweaking there just to make sure we had it right. Correction to some of the labeling with the source water protection plan, so that's Schedule 11B. So we were collaborating with the CRCA, just we got some terminology wrong, so we fixed that. And I guess with respect to the commercial land study, we made some changes to Schedule CN1, which is the Cataraqui North secondary plan. I did present that at the November 17th public meeting. In the current iteration of the plan, all the commercial lands are just recognized as commercial. It doesn't distinguish between arterial or regional commercial, district commercial, or Main Street commercial. Yet the policies themselves do distinguish specific areas on the basis of commercial land use type, so we've corrected the mapping to be aligned with the policies. So this is one that I got literally today as a request from Enbridge, who was circulated in early 2015, but didn't actually comment until today. But what they've identified is that policies under 530 that deal with pipelines speak specifically to Trans-Canada only. So I won't go through the policy in detail, but it establishes expectations for when certain activities are happening within a certain catchment area of a pipeline. You have to meet certain land use tests. And then Section 5.32 kind of says that the city has the discretion to apply these tests to other pipelines, but again, it was restricted to natural gas, and Enbridge deals with petroleum. So Enbridge was actually okay with the potential inclusion of what's shown in red there, which would say that we would apply these, the city has the discretion to apply these policies to not only natural gas utilities, but other National Energy Board pipelines, which would capture Enbridge. So I do have, I guess I will request if we, later in the meeting, if we can have a motion to direct staff through council to make that change. That would, I think, address a last-minute commenter, but I think in a very practical way. It's giving the city discretion to apply a rigorous policy framework to a land use type. So in conclusion, the update that we've undertaken satisfies the requirements of the Planning Act. We've gone through this with a fine-toothed comb with our internal and external legal support. Conforms with all applicable provincial plans, has regard for matters of provincial interest, as outlined in Section 2 of the Planning Act. It's consistent with the 2014 PPS, and I did want to note that I really feel this project has benefited greatly from the rounds of iteration. And more recently, even since November 17th, we have really spent the last 3 months going through a lot of correspondence again and dealing with people individually to make sure we get this right. So next steps, you have a recommendation in front of you this evening. If you're supportive of it, it'll go to council March 7th, and then we'll send the package off to the province. I'm told our planner has certain motivation to get this done within the 180 days, if not a lot sooner, so I'm quite excited to see this implemented so we can get on with some other major tasks. But thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, a monumental task, as I said. What I'd like to do now is, I know there will be some amendments and such coming up, so if we could put the recommendation on the floor, and then we can ask questions, bring up any changes. Councillor McLaren moves, and seconded by Councillor Osanek. So I will open the floor. If you'd like questions first or amendments. Councillor Neal?
I'll hold off on the amendments to hear other people, but I did have a couple of comments and a couple of questions. First of all, I'm really thankful that the urban boundary is being maintained as it was originally or recently established, primarily because as we hear more and more, I know there's great debate about whether our population forecasts and how accurate they truly are. But however inaccurate they are, the reality is that we're below what is the anticipated growth. And so it would seem foolhardy now to expand the urban boundary at this time. I'm on Max, so I would like to know, you mentioned ODA and that the parking reflects that. Is it reflected in the width of the parking allocated to, I hate to use the word handicap, but no other word is coming to mind right now. It's been a long day. So is there some provision for a wider parking space as well?
Through you, Madam Chair. So I did think I would have the opportunity to refer you to some of these pages. So I will refer you to page 837 of the agenda.
Great.
Just so I can point out the language of the policy specifically. So if you want to flip to that page.
I will flip to there. And did MAC have an opportunity to vet this?
Yes, they did. Through you, Madam
Excellent.
Chair. Yes.
I think I'm there. Thank you. Did you say 831? 837. No wonder I can't find it. Ah, there we are.
Oh, 61. Okay. So yeah, it's up on the screen here. But I guess to answer your question, so the policy was intentionally not getting into the details of the width of spaces, which will be coming forward, I believe actually on March the 2nd of the Planning Committee meeting, dealing with the zoning. So with the zoning, we'll get into the specifics of width and length, and actually a height restriction within the space itself. But the purpose of this policy is actually to give a framework for the consideration of requests for relief from the required supply. So if you're required to supply 10 and someone's proposing 8, this is going to give guidance to staff and to the applicant as to how we're going to consider that. So it's looking at the distance between the spaces and the accessible entrance to the building, security of the parking, lighting, and other factors. So it's giving guidance to the decision-making process.
As long as it's protected, and it will be through zoning.
That's right.
Excellent. Thank you. The aggregate placeholder that you mentioned and the discussion about mining and natural heritage, I'm just curious if that's going to be the equivalent of what in collective bargaining is a commitment to come up with an agreement, and that will come through as an amendment at a later date? Is that kind of accurate process-wise?
So through you, Madam Chair, it's a good question, because at this point, we've established the placeholder, and we do need to have continued conversations about how we implement the expectation. It relates to another section of the plan that says the city has the discretion as to whether or not you're going to ask for this assessment or not. So I suspect that if we got into the habit of not asking for these assessments, the ministry will take exception to this and start to put the pressure on us to establish this understanding of when you're going to apply it and when you're not. So I think this is going to be one of a few things that we continue a dialogue on as we advance the ministry's review of the OP.
Thank you. So your work isn't done yet. My other question regards, you mentioned more stringent language coming forward on certain things. Is the previous established goal of 25% affordable housing, is that any more stringent? My problem is that that's always been a toothless lion in the whole planning process, and very few, if any, developers actually achieve that wish that we've put forward.
So through you, Madam Chair, so is it any stronger? I guess there are some more opportunities that have been established in the policy framework to support reaching the target 25%. They're carrots, they're not requirements. Bill 7, which deals with inclusionary zoning, is still in the early stages of implementation. The way that the legislation is written is that the city may establish inclusionary zoning provisions to require the supply of affordable housing. So when I mentioned half jokingly but entirely seriously that as soon as we get this off our plates and are able to focus on some of the other things that we have in the queue, Bill 7 and the consideration of inclusionary zoning is one of those things that we're collaborating with housing on right now. So,
so we should be able to capture some kind of stronger implementation of that goal in the comprehensive zoning by developing a plan for inclusionary zoning. Is that accurate?
Through you, Madam Chair, it will take shape outside of the new zoning bylaw project. It will have to. You have to justify it through an assessment of need. So there's a fair bit of work that's going to have to go into it. We are working on an information report to present to Council on Bill 7. So when I mentioned we have more carrots, more tools of recognizing the OP, so we're recognizing the opportunity that inclusionary zoning offers, and we're also recognizing the opportunity of community benefits. So the opportunity to potentially put affordable housing on a tier above other considerations through community benefits is also something we're collaborating right now with housing on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Turner?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Thank you. Your team did an amazing job. This is, as you said, a monumental task, and it was a huge read, huge, massive. But I noticed there was a letter at the back here, and it was from one of my constituents, the Buzzies, and I just wanted to double check with you that all their concerns have been addressed. If you could answer that, that'd be helpful.
Sure. Through you, Madam Chair. I wouldn't say all their concerns are addressed, but their concerns have been very carefully considered. So the concerns revolve around the methodology used to forecast noise exposure impacts related to the airport. So the methodology and then the inputs into the model. And so we have, through Transport Canada, confirmed that the model that we've used, the method we've used, is the right method. And through WSP and David Snow, who's the airport manager, and his team, we've confirmed that the input, so the forecasted volume of flights, is also appropriate and aligned with what we should expect in the future. So I don't believe the Buzzies are entirely satisfied with where we are, but we have given a lot of consideration and responded accordingly to the Buzzies, to their concerns.
Okay, I thank you for all the work you've put into that. I guess that's all for now. Thank you very much.
And Councillor Osanek?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, thanks so much again, Mr. Newman, for in this draft showing where, like the different highlights, the different color fonts, showing where the changes are, the straight throughs. That's a big help with reading this document. I have one question about page 157, and it's about large format retail. And it's the first bullet that's the first one that's been added at the top of the page, so 3.4.A.5. And I think you said that that got added possibly in version number 5, and I guess I missed it. So has that been added? It's in response to the commercial land study, right? And it says about large format retail could be a permitted use in the downtown. Is that just so if there's another S&R that might come to the downtown, it would be allowed? Like, we're not thinking about allowing a Walmart, are we? Like, is it more in the lines as if another S&R were to ever consider the downtown, it could go there to serve the downtown, people that live in the condos, that sort of thing?
Through Madam Chair, so it's intended to contemplate a large format retailer presenting an option to develop in the downtown context, so the central business district. But what's really important is the framing of the policy. So the policy is saying that we would contemplate a large format retailer, not necessarily the large format, but the large format retailer, so like a big box store. We would contemplate them locating in the central business district, subject to demonstrating compatibility, sensitivity in terms of a built form. So I don't suspect that policy would enable someone to come and put a big box store downtown without fitting the downtown character.
So I don't know if like the downtown BIA even noticed that this is added, because it's, an 800-page document, but I just wondered, if they know that it's there and if they're okay with that. And I'm just going back to even like the casino and the big uproar about, we cannot, if we are going to have a casino, it cannot be in the downtown, just how all those conversations over the years have come out. I'm just wondering if that language is okay
I
for
can
the
speak to
downtown.
that. Maybe I'll start if you want, Lanny. So the commercial lands review went through a fairly rigorous process of public consultation. So for the commercial lands review, we had an open house or two at the Invista Center with specific invites to the downtown BIA. Actually, we had meetings at John Connor Boulevard with the downtown BIA to walk them through the recommendations that were coming out of the commercial lands review. So if they did have concerns, they didn't express them, and we were very pointed in making sure they were consulted.
Great, that was my only question.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. I just want to add that in terms of what those forms of commercial entities could be, it could be grocery stores, so that we don't necessarily assume that it's one of those big box stores. So for example, there are already some that are existing in the downtown. I would say probably the Metro and the Staples would be the larger format that we would currently see in the downtown. So it could be another grocery store somewhere downtown as well.
That sounds much more reassuring. Okay, and Madam Chair, do you want me to put my amendment on the floor, or do you want to still go around?
Thanks. Go ahead.
Okay, so I do have one amendment to it, and I talked to staff today about it, and it's in the definition of valley lands. And in the definition of valley lands, it gives a bunch of characteristics of a valley land, and in all those characteristics, the very last word is "and," sort of meaning that the valley land has to be all of those characteristics, whereas I want to change it to "or," and it's because of how it says that valley lands have to be fish habitat. That's why I want to have "or," because if we use Collins Creek as an example of a valley land, right in my district at Lawrence Park, there is a big hole in the limestone that was dynamited back in 1990-something, and now for the months of June, July, and August, when it's really hot, there's no longer any water in Collins Creek until you get to Lake Ontario. And so if there are any fish that want to swim up Collins Creek, they're only allowed in the mouth during those hot summer months. So it is definitely a valley land, and most of Collins Creek, especially north of there, is a significant valley land, but definitely not fish habitat, to be considered fish habitat because how it's empty at the south there for those 3 months of the year. So what my amendment is that for the definition, so item 121 of Schedule A to Exhibit B of this report be further amended by deleting the word and replacing it with the word or. And do I have to read it out? Do you want me to read it out?
Oh,
That's okay.
Our clerk has it. We just need a
Okay.
seconder. Counselor Neal, seconds. Do you have it to put up, or? We'll just put it up on the screen.
If I could just ask a question related to this.
Sure.
I'm assuming that enhances the intent of and doesn't detract from the intent of that section. Is that accurate?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. So the intent really is to make sure that if there are two criteria that we're ultimately looking at here. One is a landform depressed, and does it serve an ecological function? So the intent was never that it be an all-inclusive thing. That there are the fundamental things is that it's depressed and that it serves an ecological purpose. And so the adding the or in place of the and will allow us to say that consideration can be given to any of the factors that contribute to ecological importance.
Thank you.
Okay, are there other questions on the amendment? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. So that's our first amendment. And I will ask for any others. Councillor Neal.
Yes, I had two amendments that I shared with staff today, and I believe we've addressed both of them. The one is concerning what my colleague Councillor Osanek had brought up, which is the whole idea of large format retail uses. And I know the original language of that was that the city would be sensitive to that, to historic building fabric, scale, pedestrian amenity linkages with the lake, and protected view corridors. Sensitive struck me as a somewhat weak action verb, and I had thought perhaps the word protect would be better, but staff in discussion said that they were in support of the idea of changing it from sensitive to that the built form is compatible with the historic fabric, scale, pedestrian amenity, and so on. So I think that gives stronger direction than just the word sensitive. So again, I think it enhances probably the original intent rather than limiting it. So if there's a seconder, I've already debated it. Sorry.
Thank you. Seconder for that motion? Councillor Osanek? Thank you. Are there any other comments? I will call the, Councillor Turner?
Through you, Madam Chair, could I just ask what staff was consulted? Was it the planning department?
Mr. Newman, and I'm not sure who else that may have been shared with, but Mr. Newman.
All right, then I'll support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Then I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried. And one more?
One more, thank you. Item 396 of Schedule A talks about all of our favorite subject, which is drive-throughs. And the language originally was to ensure the safe, efficient, and comfortable movement of pedestrians. And in the name of active transportation, I think we should amend it to include and cyclists. because would be an increasing concern in the design of drive-throughs. And again, I shared that with staff. So, and again, I've debated it if there's a seconder.
Seconder, Councillor McLaren, thank you. Comments, more questions? Then I'll call the question on the third amendment. All those in favor? Thank you, that's carried. And are there any other comments, amendments, questions? Councillor Turner.
I'm not sure if mine's a motion or an amendment. Can I ask? It's an amendment. Okay, I have an amendment I'd like to propose. I believe the clerk has it. Okay, it's a summary of the revision of Enbridge. Would you like me to read it, or is it okay? Yep. Okay, I hope I can see it. That item 890 of Schedule A to Exhibit B of report number PC-17 to the further amendment and to include the phrase or National Energy Board regulated pipeline following the word utilities so that it reads as following. Thank you, it's bigger. No, that's cyclists. And we don't want cyclists on the pipeline. No.
This will shock the mover, but I'm enthusiastically going to second that amendment.
Really? Awesome. Okay. Okay, 5.32. The policies of the section 5.30 and 5.31 may apply to development proposed to the proximity to the facilities of the other natural gas utilities or National Energy Board regulated pipelines, if deemed necessary by the city.
Thank you. And it's been seconded by Councillor Neal. Would you like to comment on it, or shall we just move along?
I think we should just move along. I think it's something we need to do and include
Yeah,
along with the wording.
Councillor Neal?
I was trying to figure out in my head what kind of amendment I wanted to bring forward, but I think this captures it. Perhaps, perhaps Mr. Newman can comment on what he sees the impact of this amendment.
Sure, Mr. Newman?
Sure, through you, Madam Chair. So the impact will be when Enbridge comes in with an application to do something with the pipeline, or I think more to the contrary, where someone proposes something in proximity to Enbridge's pipeline, we now have a policy framework to look at the potential impact to that pipeline that doesn't exist today. So today it only speaks to TransCanada. So we now have the opportunity to apply it to other pipelines.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will call the question. All those in favor of Amendment 4? Thank you, and that carries. And with that, if there are any other questions, comments, I will call the question on our official plan as amended. All those in favor? Thank you. That carried unanimously. Thank you. Yes, it's been a long, steady process. Thank you, thank you. And with that, I will move to 1316 Centennial Drive. And this is a zoning bylaw amendment for the new factory, in effect. And I will ask for the mover, Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor McLaren. Questions of staff? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Wow, that's a great big one too. Thank you. And number 3 is 213-219 Princess Street, zoning bylaw amendment. And this is one that did go through the Heritage Committee earlier and was passed with acclaim, actually. So I will ask if for a mover and seconder, Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Turner. Any comments, questions? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. That carries. That's great. There are no motions, notices of motions, no other business, and some correspondence from the Buzzies. And next meeting is March the 2nd. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Osanek, second by Councillor Neal. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Fabulous.